The next speaker is going to be talking about democratizing LiveOps, which is literally the byline in my pitch deck. That is literally how we describe a company that we're doing. We want to democratize LiveOps. So I want to hear how somebody else wants to democratize LiveOps and how leading studios are achieving peak efficiency in player personalization. And we've got Solomon from Clevertap who's going to come up and talk to us about it. Solomon, over to you.
So good to meet everybody. I'm Solomon Ruiz Lichter of Clevertap Gaming. A little bit about me. I'm the Senior Director of Global Gaming at Clevertap. Really, that's just a fancy way of saying that I oversee global gaming strategy from both a go-to-market and a product perspective. I work with most of our largest strategic clients, gaming clients, and mid-sized clients, really everybody. We provide solutions that leading game studios and publishers use to build deeper relationships and engage with their players. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is drive engagement, retention, and higher lifetime value. So just a little bit about us, but enough about us. Let's talk about you. So you've launched a game. This is not an easy thing to do. If you've launched a game, congratulations. You've launched a game, you found an audience. Amazing, okay? That's only half the battle, all right? And I don't want to trivialize how hard it is to launch a game, because it is difficult. But now that you've launched the game, you have a player base that you need to support. And the issue here, we'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment, is that it's very hard to keep players. You have players. Some spend a little. Some spend a lot. Targeting those players, finding out what players to engage with is a difficult thing. Growing a game is hard. You're losing players all the time. Your DAU is going down. Players constantly churn. Now we operate in a tougher macroeconomic environment, a post-IDFA world. The cost of CPI is going up higher than your LTV is. Okay, you can't keep up with it. So your KPIs begin to plateau, or worse, dip. This is a scary thing. It's an existential threat to your business if you're an indie studio, for example. Growing games is hard. Retaining players is hard. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So what do? You need to feed the beast. By feeding the beast, we're talking about evergreening the game, creating in-game offers, new events, exclusive experiences that your players can consume. But you need to balance that against this ongoing content treadmill, right? And the treadmill is two things. One, you have your core loop, you have your new characters, game assets, and levels. All of that need to be managed against the major meta features of the game. Social systems, guilds, new progression systems, quality of life fixes. So it's almost like you have two roadmaps you're operating in parallel. That's a difficult thing to do. So your core loop versus your meta, monetizing the experience, doing game design in a thoughtful way that doesn't alienate your best players. Often if you're in a core game, players tend to be a little sensitive about being overly monetized. You got to be careful that you don't go get flamed on Reddit or whatever that is. We won't talk a lot about that here. That's more a challenge for the community team, right? But it's a real thing that you need to consider. And that in and of itself is a challenge. And then thinking about how you're going to manage this feature roadmap of meta versus core loop is a difficult thing to do. But you need to monetize the game, right? Ultimately, the goal here is agility. You have to be agile. If you're not agile, if you can't react quickly, you're in trouble. Right? You need to be able to react to these problems, derive insights from data, and enable your game teams to move with speed and accuracy. Right? Slow reaction times and lagging optimization times, once you figure out that something is not working right, that's lethal in this market. It might have been okay 2 years ago, not anymore. Every moment of every day, you are losing players. I don't mean to sound dramatic, but that's really what it is, and that's what we're talking about here today. So, how do we solve this today? Typically, most game makers solve this problem or address this challenge on an ongoing basis through kind of a really effort-intensive manual process that requires this kind of confluence of resources, tactics, systems, technologies. It's a difficult thing. But if you're brave and you're courageous, this is what you do. Okay? So let's look at some of the complexities in how most game makers solve this challenge today. Spreadsheets. Who uses spreadsheets here? This is one very, thank you. This is a common solution, right? Is to use these to manage all kinds of things about your game, these kind of server-uploaded CSV sheets. You use them to do everything from managing basic Fatui testing. Maybe if you're really brave, you use them to manage your in-game economy. As you go on and on, as you go and progress further, these things get more and more complex. So you feed these spreadsheets to your back-end engineering team, who then have to write code to issue calls to your back-end to configure assets in the game. Right? Does that sound like a kind of complex process? It's because it is. Right? And I want to give a shout out to anyone in this room who does this, any game maker in this room who does this day in, day out, because you probably think you have no other choice, right? And it's just the way things are. And so the more advanced your game management becomes, the more advanced and complex your LiveOps roadmap becomes, the more advanced and complex these become. And maybe you have like, I don't know, 50, maybe you have like 3 master spreadsheets that go on forever, of a million rows. But this is how people solve these challenges day in, day out, game makers and product managers. And we just want to acknowledge that. It's a challenge, right? So, who would have thought, right? Using spreadsheets is not the most agile way to manage your game. Right? I know I'm probably blowing your mind right now, but it's important to call this out. We love how we live in a complex world, right? And we operate in a complex space, but ultimately that complexity slows us down from an innovation perspective, from a time to value perspective, from a time to market perspective, and it's important to call that out, right? So how do we do this today? How do we solve this challenge today? You do what you've always done. Right? You continue to manage experiments, run limited time events, configure your game in a really manually intensive way. And why? Again, it's just the way it's always been done. This is like just something that game makers accept, that LiveOps managers accept, that product managers accept about their job. So you want to be a game manager? Take your medicine, right? Managing your game should not require a Rube Goldberg machine, right? And I don't want to trivialize this, again, because we work in a complex space, whether you're on the tech provider side or whether you're on the game maker side. And so there's complex solutions to complex problems. And if you have a complex game economy, the solution to address that economy and target those players tends to be pretty involved. But maybe it doesn't need to be this complicated, right? So we accept this. Your game dev team basically is forced to work, or your game development team is supposed to work against an endless backlog of tickets for LiveOps, events, testing, game config tickets. And this is in addition to their main core focus, which is game development itself. They typically don't enjoy this. Do we have any developers in here? Do you guys love this? So we want to help you guys out too, right? Ultimately, this is a challenge, and it creates resource strains and tension and delays time to market and agility on both the product management side and the dev team side. It's not the most efficient way to work, right? Again, no one's judging the industry for this. This is just what it is, and it's always been for a very long time. But I think it's important to call out that it's not just the business itself, it's not just the business team itself, it's the developers too who hate this. So, shout out to y'all. And around we go. We work in this perpetual cycle of requirements gathering, planning, spreadsheets updates, and development ticket requests. It just goes on in perpetuity. Why? Because this is the way it's always been. No one questions it. It's just the complexity of working in gaming, mobile gaming. This is what people accept. And so I think it's interesting to call that out, right? That it's hard to envision a different reality when this is your reality every single day. And no one's judging you for this. In fact, hats off to all of you that go through this beautiful struggle every single day to make amazing games. There is a new way to address this challenge. You need to empower your business teams. So product and marketing teams should be able to own, and execute LiveOps, player personalization, lifecycle marketing, product A/B tests, without having to constantly tax your dev resources. You want to free your developers up from day-to-day game and event requests. Liberate your technical teams. The lifeblood of any gaming studio is innovation of new games. And anytime you have your development team focused on this stuff, you are taking away from time they could be using to diversify your business and release new games out into the world, broaden your portfolio. So it's really kind of an existential threat to your business, or at least it's going to slow you down in a very challenging and competitive market. Let your product managers manage the game and liberate your technical teams. We need to democratize LiveOps execution. This is the soapbox we stand on, right? We're going to say this until we're blue in the face. We see it over and over. And honestly, we are engaging more and more on the provider side with lots of technical teams, because I feel like the market's kind of reaching an inflection point now. People are beginning to understand there's probably a better way to manage this. Do we really need our core development team focusing on LiveOps event tickets or basic game config tickets? Is that really the best way to operate? Or should we put this in the hands of the business people who are closest to the revenues that we're trying to drive as a business? Democratize LiveOps execution. So here's a little bit about how it's done. Product and game teams need a tool that basically provides unprecedented ability to own the manipulation of the game experience itself in context with the in-game offers and events, in context with where the player is sitting in the overall life cycle. All that's really critical in order to do. And if you look at this diagram, we're kind of inverting a funnel, or however you want to look at it. We're inverting a technical stack. You look at your game server. Most of you have some kind of back-end game server managing a lot of the complex logic and assets of the game, managing the economy, managing maybe PvP matchup logic or whatever it is. You have typically an in-house in-game offer system that you're maintaining, and you have some kind of engagement technology, right? Whether it's your own homegrown or whether you're working with a third-party provider, that's a fairly red ocean. All of that is then pushing messaging, offers, and assets down to the client. That's the process we were just going through. So in this new way, you have the game server, you have in-game offers, you have an engagement or messaging platform of some kind, but you also have this final, what we call a game control layer. The game control layer enables your business team to make those updates to the game and run those LiveOps events in real time without having to constantly go back for development resources. It is essentially a control layer over the game server. Do you want to run your whole game through that? Probably not. There are some very complex things that you probably want to leave to the game server, right? PvP matchups, your broader virtual economy management, complex assets, things like that. But for essential configuration of the player experience, to personalize that player experience, you should give the PMs that ability. And this control layer enables you to do that. So that's the new way. Okay, so in summary, find a technology solution that enables you to push the execution of LiveOps and player personalization downstream to the business teams who actually own the monetization goals. Drive autonomy for your game team, operational efficiency for your technical teams, and speed to value for your entire studio. You can do that if you take this new approach, right? And it's different, and there are technical teams we talk to that it makes them nervous, right? To give the product team this much control. But we're seeing a lot of, we're seeing better alignment than we ever have between these teams, right? Because ultimately, in this environment where UA is so difficult, you have to really align to make the best use of any in-game experience, any game session time that you can as a team. And ultimately, it's about pushing this down to business users who can own it and freeing up your technical resources to be more efficient. Focus on the core things that they love. So that's what we do, right? We provide a platform for managing what we call the full player experience, post-UA, from lifecycle marketing all the way through mature, elder, ritualized player, through LiveOps, lifecycle marketing, and then game configuration. It's all sitting on a kind of next-gen database called Tesseract, which provides tons of different in-game events and attributes on an order of magnitude, anything above any commercial solution. And it's a reason we have a big footprint in this space. Thank you. Any questions?
Great. OK. Oh, you ended quicker than I was expecting. So have we got any questions in the room? Anyone want to? So just if you can give us a little bit more information, I'd love to know what you're trying. I saw like in your previous slide, you had LiveOps configuration as one aspect of it. You had, I can't remember all three things. In chance I can get you to go back.
Yeah. So the three kind of core components that enable that kind of management of the full player experience is lifecycle marketing, which is kind of like bread and butter, like everyone does this. It's just pulling players back into the game, typically with push and email, getting them through the Fatui, getting them converted. LiveOps, so actual in-game offers. It's generally thought of as real-time offers that happen at the moment of need while the player's in session. And then remote config, also called game configuration.
In this context, what is LiveOps to you? I mean, genuinely ask the question, because I literally have this same conversation with a lot of people. As a LiveOps, because we're specifically a LiveOps publisher, and we very much have our own methodology around this, which I won't go into for detail, because we haven't got enough time. But I'd love to know what you think LiveOps is, so that the room understand what.
Well, at a very high level, LiveOps is the evergreening of the game, right? It is building a game that's forever changing, forever adapting to how that player would like to consume it, and obviously with a goal towards monetization. And that generally actually encompasses both the in-game offers and the configuration of the game. That's really what it is. LiveOps is also testing.
I mean, for me,
always testing.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, but for me, LiveOps is about player experience, and it's about basically understanding why people want to keep playing, and how do you keep giving the things that they love. And that means events, that means promotions, that means offers, that means all of the above. But on that note, we could carry on this conversation for a very long time. I am going to say, on that note, we've got a panel that we're just going to bring up on stage. Thank you very much for that, Simon. And like I say, always good to hear about how different people are handling LiveOps.